Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go. Free to come and free to go. Open up the book of stars. Open up the book.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Karmic Evolution's Astrologically Speaking podcast. I'm your host, SHERI HASAN of Karmic Evolution Astrology, and I'm coming to you on October 20th, 2023 from karmicevolution.com or any of your favorite podcast stations. Just a quick reminder that the show aims to bring you the truth about astrology and your soul's karmic evolution. I am going to abbreviate my usual housekeeping stuff because I don't know about you, but I'm kind of bored with it at this point. Anyway, I'm sorry. It's getting late. It's Thursday, October 19th. I normally have to record this show to be aired on Fridays at 11 a.m. Pacific and 2 p.m. Eastern. It's now about 6:30, quarter to 7 p.m. Eastern time, and I need to get this done within the next hour. So I'm going, as I said, to abbreviate some of the housekeeping stuff and just briefly tell you that, again, you can listen to this podcast anytime at karmicevolution.com. The show drops every Friday, a new show, at 11 a.m. Pacific and 2 p.m. Eastern. And if you're on the karmicevolution.com site, you can find and download for free the PDF, How to Keep Your Sun Sign Happy, which is friendly advice for every sun sign by renowned evolutionary astrologer Stephen Forrest about what each of us, depending on our sun sign, needs to be happy. Suffice it to say that I have Stephen's permission to distribute these remarks of his, which he made in an interview with me several years ago. So be sure to grab it when you're on this page. Also, you can always keep track of what's going on with Karmic Evolution on my Facebook page at Karmic Evolution for Your Soul and on Instagram at karmic.evolution. Also, I am still offering a discounted Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading for 75 minutes for only $125. And you can find that and more information about it at karmicevolution.com/karmic125. This is for people who predominantly want to better understand their soul's purpose and mission in this lifetime, and who would like to gain insight into what has been holding them back based on past karmic patterned behavior from achieving their highest destiny in this lifetime. I'd like to say that conscious awareness has never been so easy or so affordable when you take advantage of this Karmic Evolution Natal Insight discounted reading. And finally, I'm teaching an 8-week class titled Intro to Aspects, How to Get to the Heart of the Chart, which will start this Sunday on October 22nd. You can find out more information, details on the class, when it starts, when it's being held. It will be Sundays from noon to 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time from October 22nd through December 10th. And again, you can find out more details at aspnj.org. That's ASP for the Astrological Society of Princeton, NJ for New Jersey.org, because I am holding the class under the auspices of that astrological organization. So again, if you want to find out more, just go to aspnj.org, and you can feel free, of course, to email me at SHERI at SHERI at karmicevolution.com. All right, so let's get into this week's astro news you can use. There's clearly been a lot going on this past couple of weeks, but this past week in particular. So I'd like to point out that this past week's quincunxes, the 150-degree aspects made between this week Mercury and the Sun in Libra to Uranus in Taurus, both on October 17th and 18th respectively, followed by Mercury in Libra's quincunx to Neptune in Pisces on October 19th, have caused both rapid and confusing energies to which we may still find ourselves adjusting now. So the 150-degree quincunx aspect, for those who do not know, places two planets mathematically in aspect to each other, but because they are not quite 180 degrees apart and cannot see each other, and are in signs that usually don't resonate with each other, they can refer to a blind spot or some kind of missing information. And when that happens, we're asked to adjust by figuring out what it is we're missing in the message the two planets are struggling to communicate to each other. So in this case, Mercury the messenger in Libra, quincunx to Uranus, which happens to be retrograde right now in Taurus, received a sudden, unexpected, and shocking message from out of left field on October 17th. In other words, something not at all on its radar, which left Mercury, the great communicator, a bit stunned. So the most obvious depiction of this on an as above, so below level was the shocking bombing of the hospital in Gaza that has reportedly killed hundreds of people and wounded a good number. I'm going to talk about that more specifically in a minute. But the Libra Sun's quincunx to Neptune in Pisces on October 18th, followed by Mercury's quincunx to Neptune in Pisces on October 19th, both represented the distortion of information based on confusion about the actual facts about, in this particular case, whose bomb it was that killed these people, who did what to whom. This has yet to be concluded based on factual evidence, but meanwhile speculation abounds, which can also give rise to much confusion, many accusations, and more violence in reaction in many affected areas of the world. So when we combine this with Mars' recent entrance into Scorpio on October 12th, we already had a potential recipe for the fast, impetuous, impatient dissemination of the news about the situation, and the jury's still out, as far as the general public is concerned, about how to distinguish between the two extremes. Who's telling the blunt truth? That's Scorpionic, right? Who rushed to judgment, Mars? And who's purposefully disseminating mis- and disinformation for manipulative reasons? That's the quincunxes to Neptune, not the least of which is designed to find allies for one's cause. At this point still, accusations seem to be the modus operandi of so many, regardless of actual facts, especially when those facts, as I said, are as of yet still to be absolutely confirmed. Now, before I get more into that, however, I'd like to point out that on Monday, October 16th, as the Scorpio moon opposed Uranus retrograde in Taurus, it was followed by the Mercury in Libra quincunx to Uranus the next day on October 17th, that Donald Trump was also hit by a partial gag order from Judge Tanya Chutkan in the DOJ Special Prosecutor Jack Smith's federal felony indictment case against him, which is scheduled to begin on March 4th of 2024. So by the time the Libra Sun and Mercury quincunx Neptune, October 18th and 19th respectively, questions still remained about what exactly was a partial gag order. Because apparently the partial gag order ordered by the judge did not contain specific language saying that Trump could not threaten, for example, directly or indirectly, by, say, retweeting or reposting another person's threat, whether it was veiled or otherwise, to the judge. It had talked about the court staff, but it didn't specifically name the judge in that case or any other cases. So, in fact, Trump proceeded to violate or not the partial gag order almost right away because he made some statements derogatory about Judge Chutkan. And by October 17th, as the Israeli situation was just beginning to calm down a little, since the Hamas attacks on Israel that killed 1,400 Israelis, the kidnapping by Hamas of more than 200 hostages since October 7th and 8th, and the death of 3,785 people in Gaza due to Israeli retaliation, and that number is according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health. And as U.S. President Biden announced his trip to Israel for October 18th, it again escalated rapidly when the hospital in Gaza was bombed, leading to a loss of life, as I said, totaling hundreds of Gazans, many of them seeking shelter both in and around this major area's hospital. Now, again, the actual number of deaths and casualties is still in dispute as per the Sun and Mercury's quincunx to Neptune, the planet of illusion, confusion, and delusion. And the New York Times reported this on October 19th, and here I quote, "On the night of the explosion, a spokeswoman for the Gazan Health Ministry put the toll at 500 or more dead, which the ministry later changed to hundreds. No figure could be confirmed independently, but images from the hospital and witness accounts made clear that it was high. Mohammed Abu Salim, the head of the nearby Shifa Hospital, said in an interview hours after the blast that 150 to 200 people killed in the explosion were taken to his hospital, along with about 300 people who had been wounded. He said he had no official tally of the dead because of the terrible condition of many of the bodies. The Israeli military said Wednesday morning, and that would have been the 18th of October, that the number of casualties was inflated, citing intelligence without elaborating. The Gazan Health Ministry, which is run by Hamas, said later on Wednesday that 471 people had been killed and hundreds more injured. The figures could not be independently confirmed, though video footage verified by the New York Times shows scores of bodies strewn across the hospital's courtyard." End quote. And I had written earlier this week, but unfortunately I had not been able to post it, that, quote, "with the upcoming first quarter lunar square, which is occurring on October 20th, and Venus trine and a Venus-Jupiter trine that day as well, or is that, hold on the 21st, I think it perfects actually on both days. Venus trines, yeah, the 21st and the 22nd. Anyway, looking ahead, right, that an announcement may well be made having to do with finances. And that's because we're waxing actually tonight on October 19th Pacific time, and early tomorrow morning, October 20th, which will have passed by the time you're listening to this, the Sun-Mercury conjunction in Libra, which is usually associated with a major announcement of some kind, often coming from in ancient times, a king, or in modern times, a head of state. So I was saying that, the first quarter lunar square, which occurs, on the 21st, is, and I'm going to get into the details of that in a minute, so bear with me because, as I said, I've been struggling to get this out. Some of you may have listened to me last week. I've recovered from COVID, but there are a few glitches. Some glitches I still got to work on. So I'm trying to get this out with all the information intact. But if it's a little out of order, you're going to have to forgive me. Or a little repetitive, which is my worst nightmare. But anyway, I digress. So, I had basically been thinking that as the sun approached Mercury, we're going to get a lot of announcements this week, particularly ones from heads of state. So my point is that this conjoins pretty much with tomorrow's, and I mean the October 21st, because now I'm talking as if it is October 20th that I'm recording this, yuck, yuck, that we are pushing through the first quarter square of this monthly lunar cycle since the Libra new moon solar eclipse of October 14th. So I had said that combined with the Mercury Sun conjunction in Libra and the upcoming Venus-Jupiter trine, that an announcement made may well have to do with finances. So as soon as I wrote that on like Tuesday, I think it was, the 17th, I saw, or maybe the 18th, I saw that a news alert read, quote, Biden announces deal with Israel to allow humanitarian assistance from Egypt into Gaza and $100 million in aid to Palestinians. So, again, by late October 19th and early on the 20th, depending on your time zone, as the Libra Sun was on its way to conjoin Mercury in the attempt to calm the situation and to find some kind of compromise that would move us toward greater balance, harmony, and hopefully eventually peace, that since, as I said, the sun often represented the king in ancient astrological times, but now more often represents a head of state, we can clearly see how U.S. President Biden's sudden travel, when Mercury quincunxed Uranus, to Israel during this time of crisis was prompted by his desire to both reaffirm American support for Israel and to bring some sort of stability to this quickly spreading international crisis. And as per NBC News on October 18th, again, as the Sun-Mercury conjunction was waxing, and I quote, Biden said Wednesday the United States is providing $100 million in humanitarian assistance for Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. Quote, this funding will help support over 1 million displaced and conflict-affected people with clean water, food, hygiene support, medical care, and other essential needs, a White House statement subsequently said. Continuing the quote, civilians are not to blame and should not suffer for Hamas's horrific terrorism. Civilian lives must be protected and assistance must urgently reach those in need, the White House said. We will continue to work closely with partners in the region to stress the importance of upholding the law of war, supporting those who are trying to get to safety or provide assistance, and facilitating access to food, water, medical care, and shelter. So I thought it would be interesting for a minute to take a look at Joe Biden's chart, which is November 30th, 1942. He was born at 8:30 a.m. in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And when I did, I discovered that transiting Saturn, which is beginning to slow down already in preparation for his station direct, which will happen at 0 degrees and 31 minutes of Pisces on November 4th, that while it's doing so, it's conjoining with Biden's natal third house south node. Now, Stephen Forrest, one of my astrological mentors, teaches that the mean nodes work best in delineation, while other astrologers swear by the true node. They are often very close, just based on slightly different calculations, because the mean node being the statistical mean of the movement of the transiting nodes, because they're usually retrograde and only occasionally direct, and the true nodes being their exact location by degree and minute at any given moment. So I want to point that out. I'm going to give you both because it's just interesting. You guys can decide what you think, but either way, I think it's still all close enough to be an orb. So in any case, transiting Saturn's, like I said, getting ready to station now, and has been at, it was retrograde at 0 degrees and 59 minutes of Pisces since October 11th. Now, Saturn went forward in Pisces after it entered Pisces up to 7 degrees Pisces, then stationed retrograde and came back to 0, which is what the degree it entered on October 11th. And again, it's going to station direct on November 4th at 0 degrees and 31 minutes of Pisces, as noted, and won't move on when it starts to go forward to 1 degree Pisces until November 28th. So this means that transiting Saturn remains on Biden's third house 0 degree 9 minute Pisces true node, or within a degree of his 29 degree 42 minute Aquarius mean node. You see, this is where the argument about nodes comes in, because just that small difference between the mean and the true node creates nodes in different signs. As we speak right now, transiting Saturn is at 0 degrees 43 minutes Pisces, so it's basically conjoining his natal south node regardless of which sign or which true or mean node you want to use. So I wanted to just give you that little lesson, but in any case, here is how astrologer Celeste Teal delineates this transit, Saturn to one's south node, in her book, The Lunar Nodes, Discover Your Soul's Karmic Mission. Hang on one second, and I will read that to you. Let me see. I thought I had it prepared. I did. Okay, here we go. All right, Saturn conjunct the south node by transit. Here's her delineation. It is hard to find supporters, and there are difficulties or differences of opinion with superiors, authorities, or older people. They are demanding. Restrictions and limiting circumstances crop up, you think? It is taking time to reestablish status and recognition as it enters a nebulous or undefined period, and even more so if we assume a south node is in Pisces. There are material decreases, Teal continues, physical weakness or health issues of a Saturn nature arise. Now, medically, Saturn would be related to the skin, the bones, and the knees. So keep that in mind. Oh, and the teeth. It has to do with skeleton. Anyway, much effort, Teal says, is required in dealing with old issues or problems that were put off in the past. Again, you think? This is a time when a most important contribution may be made, even though considerable sacrifices might have been required. The matters of the house ruled by Saturn undergo obstacles and problems. If Saturn goes retrograde around this time, which it already did, it may make multiple passes within a condensed time frame, which it is doing right now. So I think that Biden's going to have to continue to fight against the propagandist fiction versus the reality of his diminished status, you know, all the propaganda and BS that he's demented and all the stuff, or that he's senile, you know. So be it about his mental cognitive function or his physical one. Now, Saturn equals limitations or restrictions, as we know. So he's being restricted right now in his efforts to both gain support for the upcoming 2024 presidential election, what would be his re-election, and for his current moves within the microcosm vis-a-vis this current U.S. support for Israel. So in other words, he has detractors and lots of them. It will take a lot of effort and hard work on his part to make a show of his stamina. I mean, I'm not planning to fly suddenly to Israel in the middle of the night when I'm 81, you know. So he's got an uphill battle to fight on many fronts right now, both domestic and international. And this is likely to ultimately play out in his second house, because his second house is ruled by Saturn, since it has Capricorn on the cusp. And the second house is also naturally ruled by Venus's Taurus. So in addition to the second house being a work house in terms of how we earn our money. It's also known as the house of values, including self-value and self-worth, and our actual tangible physical resources, as well as our relationships, which is what Venus is all about, and our physical relationships. So to me, this means that Biden has the ability to commit to long-standing partners and to, quote, do his duty, particularly financially, versus running off and ignoring his obligations as the leader of the free world, as America likes to think of itself, right? So, of course, no one expects a president to run off and ignore his duties. Well, unless we're talking about Trump on the golf course. So I think this means that people will ultimately recognize his dedication to his values as a large part of his appeal. In other words, in today's world, at least he has values, whereas whether others agree with them or not. But it's important to note that when Saturn transits our chart, well, before I get into that, I just want to say, Biden was called on a news show today the comfort commander, or the commander-in-chief comforter, something like that, because, he has a Taurus moon, but it's interesting that many are lauding the fact that Biden's old enough to have had relationships with many of the players that are being contacted by him now, as well as the newer players who are involved in this most recent Middle East crisis. And he's not a newbie in any sense of the word, which is the kind of thing that people have been denigrating him before. But his more cautious Taurus moon is not prone to flying off the handle or making sudden decisions. And his 12th house Scorpio, Mars, Sun, Venus stellium allow him to work behind the scenes quietly, surreptitiously, right? Somebody asked him, one of the press asked him a question the other day, and he answered, and he said, well, if I tell you, then, it wouldn't be a secret. We wouldn't be able to accomplish anything if everybody knew what we were doing, right? But it's important to note, too, that when Saturn transits our chart, there's often a delay related to its ultimate outcome, or that transit's ultimate outcome. So now I just said that Biden is more prone to being cautious and slow, or deliberative, let's use that word, because of his Taurus moon in the 5th house. But I will also say that he has only one planet in his chart in fire, and that's his 8th house Pluto in Leo, and that when we lack fire, or we have only one planet in a fire sign, and I'm not talking about the angles, I'm only talking about the 9 heavenly bodies, no asteroids, no Chiron, that it can be a person with a sudden temper. In its extreme, it can be, rage, just complete and total rage. But given that we have an awful lot of his past public behavior to go on, and enough stories about his private behavior, his temper doesn't seem to get the best of him when it's time for him to make important, calculated decisions. So in that realm, I think his Sun et al., that Scorpio stellium, reign more supreme. So in the end, however, and over time, I think this current set of circumstances will help more than hurt him. But then again, what do I know? I'm just an astrologer! Okay, so meanwhile, Biden's got transiting Mars and Scorpio in his 11th house, which will perfect an exact square to his natal 7-degree, 13-minute Pluto in Leo on October 22nd. So, in terms of danger, however you want to interpret that, it ain't over until it's over. And I'd point out, too, that he has a natal Mars-Pluto square with his natal Mars at 12 degrees, 35 minutes of Scorpio, so he's no stranger to this energy. In addition, since Celestial, the astrologer whose book I just read from, mentions health, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Biden's got Hygeia, the goddess asteroid of health, conjunct his 8th house Pluto, but just over his 10th house cusp in the 10th house at 13 degrees, 31 minutes Leo. So you can see that the natal Mars actually squares his natal Hygeia more tightly than it does his natal Pluto. And we know his history of loss and grief early on at the loss of his wife and baby daughter due to a tragic car accident when he was a young senator, and again in 2015 when he lost his son Beau to cancer. So whether this Mars square triggers personal loss or a more collective one may remain to be seen. So I gave the date of the exact Mars square Pluto, and you've got to know it's going to be probably another 2 weeks until the Mars squares, a week and a half maybe, till the same transiting Mars moves on to square his Hygeia. And it will also then eventually, he's having a Mars return, right? So let's note too, that at this waxing Sun-Mercury superior conjunction, which I've been talking about all along, that culminates tonight and tomorrow, depending on your time zone, the superior conjunction means it occurs as Mercury is direct rather than in retrograde motion. And when Mercury is retrograde and the two planets conjoin, that's called an inferior conjunction. But Biden is addressing the nation tonight, October 19th, as this superior conjunction of Sun and Mercury in Libra conjoin. So he's addressing the nation and presumably the world at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday, October 19th. And we can see that this conjunction occurs exactly, well, it'll occur, or they'll conjoin exact, just hours later at 1:38 a.m. Eastern Time on October 20th. And as we in the astrological trade like to say, you can't make this stuff up. Now again, this is being recorded now. It's an hour before his actual address, so I can't give you any news and comment on what he is actually saying, except that with Venus waxing towards its trine to Jupiter, that, you know, we see these easy financial, and given the easy financial implications of this softer aspect, especially with Jupiter, even though it's currently retrograde transiting through Venus itself, we already know that he'll be talking about his plan to ask Congress for $100 billion to help fund Israel's defenses, including its Iron Dome cybersecurity system currently protecting Israeli citizens from rockets and other artillery assaults out of both Gaza and the West Bank's border with Lebanon and Syria. And he'll also be asking for those funds, to fund the Ukrainian war so that it can defend itself against Russian aggression. And it probably includes the $100 million for humanitarian aid for Gazan citizens. So we experienced these waxing quincunxes as we move towards this Libra Sun-Mercury conjunction, and those energies also coincidentally resulted in other heads of state and their representatives heading to Israel and Jordan and other points in the Middle East to consult with the powers that be there, as well as especially, as I said, with Mars and Scorpio now, many of the nations that have issued travel advisories, including the U.S., Britain, and France, concerning travel to Lebanon. The United States has given transport at this point to all of its U.S. Embassy employees' family members in Beirut. So that's just something to keep in mind, too. Okay, now to the other as above, so below symbolism mirrored back to us from the heavens here in the United States through domestic politics during this same period. It emerged through the U.S. House of Representatives and its chaotic struggles to appoint a new speaker. Remember, without a speaker, we can't bring any legislation to the floor for a vote, and Congress is essentially stymied, stuck, frozen, however you want to look at it. So, again, remember, we're still under the energy or the auspices of the Libra new moon's monthly cycle from October 14th, and both the Israel, Gaza, and House chaotic events heightened as the Libra Sun exact conjoined with the mean transiting Libra South node and opposed both the Aries North Node and Eris in Aries exact on October 18th. Now, I want to say just a quick word again about Eris, the dwarf planet of chaos, discord, and strife. And the fact that she is conjunct the North Node and not the South Node. So when a planet is conjunct the North Node, according to Stephen Forrest, it bears down on the South Node, causing it a problem or some kind of blockage. But the fact that it is on the North Node also points the way. So this is a conundrum that those of us who are interested in this kind of stuff have yet to parse out in terms of reality and, actual physical manifestation of it, right? So what I want to say is that although Eris represents chaos, that historically, traditionally, from chaos always comes clarity. At least that's a belief we might cling to now based on the earliest formation of what scientists now call Haldane soup, or the mixture of atoms and molecules that, when ignited, morphed into the first amoebic cellular form of life. So Neptunian and Piscean confusion, combined with Eris's penchant for chaos, discord, and strife, read war based on competition sparking conflict, and Mars and Scorpio's penchant for conflagration based on opposition, we can now see that how this recipe leading up to current times is in need of some sort of emulsifying ingredient to achieve at least an uneasy combination, if not a more positive one. But that is going to take time. I think last week I spoke about when Eris and the North Node will exact conjoin, and I do believe I was using the true North Node, and that's still not even till sometime either later in October or November. But as the, at the same time that the Israeli situation was escalating and Biden was announcing his trip to Israel during these waxing quincunxes, we also saw that October 17th was the day of the first failure of the House's GOP to elect a new speaker. And the following day, on October 18th, the second vote for Jim Jordan, the Trumpist right-wing MAGA Republican from Ohio, failed again to attain the votes necessary to achieve the rank of Speaker of the House. Now, by earlier today, on October 19th, Jordan had agreed to try to let the House grant temporary powers to GOP North Carolina Congressman Patrick McHenry as Speaker pro tem, meaning that McHenry would be Speaker but in name only. Now, it's interesting because McHenry was designated by the former Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, as Speaker pro tem, and he would, according to the New York Times, hold, and here I quote, the position of Speaker pro tempore under a House rule instituted after the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. It requires that the Speaker secretly prepare a list of lawmakers to temporarily assume the post in the event that it should suddenly become vacant. The ouster of Speaker Kevin McCarthy this month activated the rule for the first time, and Mr. McHenry, a close ally of his, was at the top of his list. And the article goes on, but because the situation is without precedent, the scope of an acting speaker's powers is a matter of dispute. Some lawmakers in both parties believe they should eliminate any uncertainty by passing a resolution to explicitly empower Mr. McHenry to conduct legislative business for a set period of time. They had been discussing doing so through early January, although the timing was a point of debate, end quote. So again, we can see the Neptunian influence here. As many are saying, there's no real constitutional guidance on the actual duties or limitations of a Speaker pro tem. So agreements will have to be worked out, likely between the hard right Republicans and the moderates, as well as the Democrats, some of whose votes may be needed to achieve the McHenry plan. Now, again from the New York Times, quote, after falling short in 2 consecutive votes for Speaker, Mr. Jordan, the hardline co-founder of the House Freedom Caucus and a favorite of former President Donald J. Trump, had told members during a closed-door meeting on Thursday morning that he did not plan to force a third vote right away. His candidacy has run headlong into opposition from a block of mainstream GOP holdouts, and he appeared to be losing more ground with each vote. Instead, he said he would back a plan floated by some centrist Republicans and Democrats to explicitly empower Mr. McHenry, whose role is primarily to hold an election for a permanent one, to conduct legislative work through January 3rd. So what we know now is that this has all been happening as not only we wax towards the Sun-Mercury conjunction at the first quarter lunar square of the Libra new moon solar eclipse from October 14th. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but that will happen on October 21st, as will late on the 20th today, supposedly, Mercury squares Pluto from Libra to Capricorn, and the Sun does the same on the 21st. Then we have the first quarter square of the Capricorn moon to the Libra Sun, and then we have the Venus trine to Neptune. All of these are waxing right now. That's the point. And then late on the 21st and early on the 22nd, depending on your time zone, Mars moves into Scorpio. And on the 22nd, Mercury will trine Saturn. And then on the 23rd of October, the Sun moves into Scorpio and the Sun trines Saturn. So what's interesting to note is that over this next week, right, we're in the first quarter waxing square and we'll be approaching the Taurus full moon lunar eclipse in a week on October 28th, and that the October 24th solar eclipse asked us to plant seeds that would blossom into new choices of partners, presumably better choices, and the lunar eclipse on the 28th will ask us to release the never-ending kind of transformational process that Pluto-ruled Scorpio so loves in order to bring in what the Taurus moon reminds the Scorpio sun that it's forgotten, which is that partnerships and relationships should be, or just in general, we all have partnerships and relationships or we wouldn't be human, right? So, the whole world is about that, but that we're to move away from this constantly shifting, turning, transformative energy towards a stable, calm, peace, and serenity. And again, that's particularly related to our partnerships, be they significant others, family, friends, colleagues, bosses, or even our relationships with institutions, etc. So what's interesting to know now, too, is that going back to Jim Jordan and this chaotic situation that's been going on as I speak for 15 days now, which is obviously just a day over 2 full weeks, that the United States Congress has essentially been unable to function in full, that during a contentious closed-door meeting of the Republicans on October 19th, as these other energies, Mercury square Pluto, Sun square Pluto, these are oppositional energies, that this group of Republicans who backed Jordan demanded that he, quote, fight on. And the quote from the Times is, "We made the pitch to members on the resolution as the way to lower the temperature and get back to work," Mr. Jordan said, meaning the resolution to allow McHenry to be the Speaker pro tem for a little bit longer so that he can bring legislation to the floor, so expanding the powers from those that were written in after September 11th of 2001. Quote, "We decided that wasn't where we're going to go. I'm still running for speaker. I plan to go to the floor and get the votes with this race. So he said he wanted to speak with the 22 Republicans who opposed his nomination on Wednesday before scheduling a third vote. So this is all as of this afternoon. The idea was met with intense backlash during a raucous closed-door meeting of House Republicans, with several members emerging and declaring the proposal dead on arrival. Some members waved pocket-sized copies of the U.S. Constitution and suggested the plan violated the country's founding principles. So again, dwarf planet Eris's powerful, chaos-inducing influence can hardly be ignored as we watch these events unfold up until now. And so the headline this afternoon read, Jordan had reversed himself and announced he was going to push for a third speaker vote, although exactly when was unclear. So again, chaos much? I think so. I'm sorry if that wasn't clear. It was the proposal to empower Mr. McHenry, the Speaker Pro Tem, that had angered the hard-right Republicans. So before I sign off in the time I have remaining, I would like to take a quick look at Jim Jordan's chart and why he may be such a fighter by nature. So Jordan, for whom we have no established birth time, was born on February 17th of 1964 in Troy, Ohio. I thought it was rather interesting is that he came into this lifetime with a Capricorn South node as 8 degrees 49 minutes, and that's the mean node. Since Saturn conjoins his Mars and natal Sun in Aquarius, and again, we don't know what house because we don't know his ascendant because we don't have his time, they form a stellium from 25 to 28 degrees Aquarius. And we know because they're in Capricorn, because he has the Capricorn South node, we know he's someone who's concerned with appearing responsible in order to achieve and maintain at least the illusion of being someone with a serious reputation. He also has an Aries moon, but again, we can't get the exact degree of the moon because we don't know the exact moment of his birth. However, we do know that during that 24-hour period, his moon was in Aries, because here it's at 2047, which is only almost 21, and it would have to be within 7 degrees on either side, and neither way, whether we minus 7 degrees from 2047 and we get 1347, or we add and we get 2747, we do not see the moon during that 24-hour period on February 17th of 1964 in any other sign besides Aries. So he has an 8-degree Venus in Aries conjunct a 10-degree Eris in Aries, as do all of us born within the last 80 years. And then Jupiter at 1747 Aries conjunct the moon at 2047. Now again, that moon could be 7 degrees back or 7 degrees forward. 7 degrees forward would still put it within a 10-degree orb, and many of us modern psychological and evolutionary astrologers will go with that, okay? So moon Jupiter is often somebody who may, and if any of you have it, don't get upset, but it can indicate a kind of grandiosity. It certainly does indicate a great deal of optimism, and in Aries, this is a fighter, and particularly a fighter for a cause, because Jupiter can represent a cause, be willing to march into hell for a heavenly cause, right? And the Capricorn South Node, which is squared most tightly by Venus in Aries and Eris, the Capricorn South Node indicates that, as I said, he came in feeling a great deal of responsibility for whatever reason. Nobody else is going to do it, so I guess I have to. And then the moon and the Jupiter go, yeah, I'll do it, let's go, So, I mean, when we run a noon chart, we get the stellium from Venus to the moon in the 11th house, which would mean he might have been somebody who led perhaps an army, in past life karma. But I cannot say that with any degree of certainty because I don't have his time. So we've got the stellium of Saturn, which rules his south node, Mars, and which rules his moon, and the sun in Aquarius, making him a little bit perhaps rebellious. And Saturn Aquarius can be very rebellious, and Mars, of course, can as well. Can make one ideological, right, as part of their personality, which I think we could say is pretty accurate with him, the founder of the Freedom Caucus or whatever, right, and someone prone to action. So the fact that he was a gym teacher is no surprise. Of course, they are now accusing him of using this time during these speaker votes to bully people who didn't vote for him, or bully them out of changing their votes. And that's a whole nother thing that's gotten a lot of press up until today, or specifically today, actually, about how other GOPers, there are a couple who changed their vote from the first vote on the 17th to the second one on the 18th, and they voted from yes to appoint Jordan to no. And they are saying credible death threats. In one case, a representative's wife got a text saying, that Jordan had to be elected speaker, and, what was her husband thinking, and yada, yada. So there's more I wanted to talk about, but as usual, I run out of time. He also has, I'll mention this, and maybe if he's still on the radar next week, which I frankly hope not, but that his progressed Mercury stationed retrograde just recently on May 1st, 2023. His natal Mercury is at 11 degrees 31 minutes of Taurus. And when Mercury stations retrograde by progression, it mimics the normal Mercury retrograde, but normal Mercury retrograde is about 21 days, and the progressed one is like 20 years. Mercury moves pretty quickly, so whether it takes that long or not, but definitely, we're talking like 15 years minimum, okay? So that's an interesting development, and I was hoping to read you something about that, but again, we'll postpone that to next week. But that progressed Mercury is also squaring, I think, what did I have here? It's going to square his natal Mercury at 10 degrees and 3 minutes of Aquarius. So that's an interesting development. We'll, like I said, keep our eye on that. But the other thing I wanted to mention that happened today, as well as the Sun conjoined Mercury, waxed into its conjunction to Mercury, and is doing so as I speak, is that Sidney Powell, the Kraken lady lawyer, pled guilty and agreed to testify against other defendants, including Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani. And if that's not big news, both on the domestic level and potentially the international one, given that Trump's still running for president in 2024, I don't know what is. I say that because, first of all, it was announced that Powell has now agreed to partner with the prosecution. Remember Libra new moon energy and solar eclipse. Sudden crises arising. Go back and listen to last week if you don't know what the heck I'm talking about. But it was announced, she went into Fani Willis's courtroom this morning in Georgia and said that she was pleading guilty in the Georgia state election racketeering case. Now, the penalties are very light, and you can look them up. It's like $6,000 and some other BS-y kind of stuff, and people are starting to already get agitated about that. But again, with all these other energies, we're jumping to conclusions. She's going to testify in the Georgia trial, but also one of the pundits was saying, after this was announced, that in admitting her guilt in the Georgia trial, she is also now copped to being guilty in Jack Smith's federal trial against Trump and the co-conspirators. I think the 6 of them, she was an unindicted or an unnamed co-conspirator, and that this incriminates her there. So the speculation is that her attorneys are probably, as we speak, feverishly negotiating with Jack Smith's team. They've already done it with Fonnie Willis's team, but negotiating with his team to also testify against Trump and others at the federal trial. And that's the one I mentioned earlier, where Judge Chutkan put the partial gag order on Trump. Wait till we see what he says about Sidney Powell, if he hasn't already, on his Truth Social or wherever. So keep an eye out for that. But I also think that her testimony, having announced this, the testimony is symbolically equated or equivalent to her playing the character of Eris, again, the goddess of discord, chaos, and strife, throwing the golden apple down the middle of the table. At the banquet, she's crashed because she was obviously pissed off that she was never invited. I mean, in this case, she's pissed off that she was included, right? So there's a little bit of an irony, right? But I just said what I said on Fox. I didn't think anyone would take it seriously. You know, that was her defense in the Dominion trial. She's also being accused of defamation, too, in some of these other lawsuits. And I don't know if she's named in the, what's it called? Not systematic is what I want to say, but, you know, not the Dominion, the other group that is suing Fox. I don't know if they're suing her personally as well. But anyway, again, this so corresponds to the astrological energies that it's just, you know, it's just whatever. So here's what someone said today, that she has every incentive to come clean and testify against Trump in Jack Smith's case, because having a witness like that would be enormous. That's what one legal pundit just said. So anyway, I am out of time. The only other thing I want to mention is the other announcement that was made this evening on October 19th. Sun Mercury is again in the New York Times. Israel-Hamas war. Egypt and UN lay groundwork for aid into Gaza, officials say. Quote, an agreement was reached, officials said, to raise a UN flag at the Rafah crossing and to have international observers inspect aid trucks before they enter the enclave. With basic human necessities in Gaza nearly depleted and trucks full of food, water, and medicine waiting nearby in Egypt, officials said they had made progress on Thursday in complex negotiations to open the border for humanitarian deliveries. Aid organizations have been told that the Rafah border crossing would open on Friday morning, according to an aid official who was not authorized to discuss the matter publicly and spoke on condition of anonymity. But there were no public announcements giving any details of how the desperately needed supplies were to be delivered. All right. Well, Godspeed to those supplies, and let us pray for peace and harmony in all partnerships, personal and societal and collective. And thank you, everyone, for joining me. I hope you found the information presented here helpful as you continue your karmic evolution in this lifetime. Please be sure to join me next week for more astro news you can use and another episode of Karmic Evolution's Astrologically Speaking podcast. Until then, may your journey be filled with karmic healing and the joy of greater consciousness. Namaste.
Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go. Free to come and free to go. Open up the book.